So it's another no-go for ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, both sides leaving the latest round of negotiations in Cairo with no deal. Hamas says it will review the new offer, but leaders are calling Israel stubborn, saying that the new plan doesn't even meet any of their demands. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu says a date is set for his military's ground offensive in Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah. The Israeli leader saying that the move is necessary for complete victory over Hamas. But the U.S., again, laying out a clear warning that an invasion would not only hurt Israel's security and have an enormously harmful effect on the 1.5 million civilians seeking refuge in the war-torn region. But as Israel sets its sights on a Rafah ground invasion, more than 1 million people across Gaza are experiencing catastrophic food insecurity and are at increased risk of acute malnutrition and death. That's half of the entire population now. And tragically, it's hitting children the hardest, including those like 13-year-old Alma. The Gazan teen lost the majority of her family to IDF bombs when they hit her home, and now she tells UNICEF that she can't eat or sleep and just wishes for nothing but to die.
بس صراحة حياتنا ليش نضلنا هنا وحتى ما شفتش أبويا وهو مستشهد ولا أمي وأخواتي ولا عمي وعمتي وولادها وعمي وولاده ومرته. أمي تحت الراتب هو وأخواتي بس أخوه واحد مثلي. أنا ما بعرفش آكل ولا حتى أنام، وكمان بسبب موت أبويا وأمي بسبب لي أزمة.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, this feeling is all too familiar among children across Gaza. UNICEF's James Elder has made multiple trips to the region since the start of this war and has been meeting with children like Alma. He joins me once again. James, I remember the last time we talked and you were there in the region. You said you had your cell phone and you were going to shoot as much as possible interviews and B-roll and all the terms that we use in television there on the ground. And just seeing this interview, it really puts into perspective how many young children are impacted and how they're trying to navigate just such profound grief.
It really does. And there's so many moments where it's impossible to capture everything, because of course sometimes the camera is just not appropriate. I can recall standing next to a doctor, a pediatrician, a surgeon, as he just broke into tears over yet another child with traumatic head injuries, another child, maybe the 7th or 8th that he was treating, and he just broke into tears saying, what did these children do? I can picture the mothers who would hold my hand time and again and just plead for the most basics, for food, for water, for medicine, thinking that somehow we didn't know that's what they needed because, of course, Kira, if the world knew what was happening to them, how could this possibly be being allowed? So that's what makes Gaza, unfortunately, so heartbreakingly powerful, that every time you turn around, there is another story, another person's story, which is just, they're just literally holding on by a thread, physically, psychologically.
So these children, James, they should be thinking about school, sports, spending time with their family, anything but the trauma of war. So does the international community hold more responsibility here when you just time after time talk to kids like Alma? I mean, who can step in and actually make a difference in addition to everything that UNICEF and other organizations are trying to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. What is happening to these children, Kira? Sometimes I would walk around a hospital where there were maybe, let's say, 1,000 injured people, 500 beds, 1,000 injured people, but there were 20,000 civilians, and this included thousands of children living in hospital corridors. What that also meant, beyond that's a terrible place to live, it also meant that every day these children would see new children arrive with amputations, new children with the wounds of war. So if ever a child in Gaza has a doubt what the daily bombings mean, they see it every day like some kind of like torturous scenario that they have to confront. So I guess the wish would be that those with that level of power saw that, had that ability. I don't think anyone who would see that level of suffering along such a large portion of a child population, and as we know, a child population, if we get it right, skills, education, apply workforce, then it's a demographic boom. I don't think anyone, if they saw that, would want for them to have anything other than their parents. But for reasons we don't know, here we are 2 weeks after a ceasefire, Kira. When I was in Gaza and that ceasefire went through the United Nations Security Council, it was just this breath of hope that went across the faces of parents thinking, I imagine tonight I will go to bed and I know tomorrow myself and my child will wake up. But those hopes have been drowned out by the bomb. So there are still, of course, those few people with influence to turn this around. But as you rightly said at the start of your show, somehow the conversation still is about a military offensive in the most densely populated portion of a densely populated Gaza Strip.
So despite Biden pushing for Israel to get more aid into the region, no aid trucks have entered northern Gaza, and there seems to be a stalemate at all ends. So what options do Palestinians have now, and what is UNICEF able to do? What are you planning to do?
Well, some of the Palestinians in the north, if you are very wealthy, and I mean very wealthy, you own multiple businesses, and you can probably afford a can of beans. For most middle-class people, and I speak, to an American or an Australian audience, middle class, you're eating wild grass. That's the diet, which is not nearly able to sustain someone. UNICEF continues to get nutritional food to children, but not to the north like we would like. We have stabilisation centres in the south because we're seeing such spikes there. A lot of shelter, a lot of blankets, a lot of water, generators we've been able to get in, Kira. That's because there are desalination water plants. If we can get those going, we might ward off some of the disease. And medicine, so the supplies we get, like so many sister agencies, are the right supplies. We just know they're a fraction of what mothers and children need. And it's a fraction. And whilst we keep fighting and this war of words with officials over number of trucks and dangers, because let's be honest, this is a perilous place to try and operate as an aid worker, whilst these arguments go on, they're a distraction because what's still happening is families are being bombed every single day. I went to a hospital every day after that ceasefire decision through the Security Council, and every day I saw new little boys and girls with the wounds of war, and far too many days I would go back the next day and a child was no longer there because they died overnight and there was a new child there. That must still be a story in the conscience of world leaders.
James Elder, it's always great to talk to you. We so appreciate you and everything that you do. Thanks, James.